I want to emphasize that, and it should be apparent to everyone, that this is a huge issue. I mean, maybe it's the sociocultural issue of our time, in so much as it's at the center of discussions of equality. And it requires not just one very good book, but many very good books to really flesh these things out. But given that we haven't had the time in our conversation for me to play devil's advocate for the synthesis view, or for us to go into all of these details that we've had to skip over, what is the way out of the identity trap as you see it? So what is the ideology around equality that you'd think would better serve the attainment of this ideal of equality than the identity synthesis?
Yeah, so one way of summarizing the key tenets of the identity synthesis, I've talked about its main themes, main building blocks, but to do what in philosophy you would call sort of rational reconstruction, a sort of an attempt to sort of capture its core in a briefer and more organized way. There was really three claims. It's that the fundamental prism for which to understand the world and society is race, gender, and sexual orientation. And that's more important than other kinds of ways of understanding the world. It's that the attempt to have universal values or neutral rules to which societies live up hasn't just gone unrealized. It was fundamentally an attempt to pull wool over people's eyes. But fundamentally, it was a sort of ideological undertaking that was meant to distract people from the forms of domination that are ongoing in our society. And so therefore, and this is the third claim, instead of trying to live up to those kind of standards, we should get rid of them and really structure our society always around how I interact with you, how we talk to each other, how we treat each other, how we should be treated by the state. All of that should be down to the particular identity groups of which you're a part. And so I think the tradition that I believe in has answers to each of those points. It is to recognize, first of all, that yes, of course, these forms of identity are one important prism for which to understand the world. In many contexts, thinking about race and gender and sexual orientation is the way to make sense of a situation. But that's not always the case. There's other contexts in which the thing that's more important is social class. There's other things in which the thing that's most important is people's ideology, what they believe in the world, what their values are, what their religious beliefs are, what their aspirations are. Depending on the context, you have to make sense of how to understand the world. There's not one one-size-fits-all solution. The second rejoinder is that universal aspirations and neutral rules have not just been used to pull wool over people's eyes. It's one of the things that allowed people to argue for the freeing of slaves, because they did have free speech even when that was uncomfortable to some of the most powerful people in society. The civil rights movement made tremendous progress, in part because it could invoke the principles of the United States Constitution, by which many Americans felt bound, but they thought their society lived up to. And when they realized the extent to which it was failing to do that, it did disturb enough of them to create significant political change. And so the third point is that we have made real progress. You can hold in your head at the same time the insight that America and every other democracy in the world remain fundamentally unjust in important ways, but there's tremendous progress still to be made. And the fact that, of course, the United States today is more racially just, more tolerant of sexual minorities, a more decent place to live for women than it was 200 or 100 or 50 years ago. And frankly, it's offensive to suggest that it is not towards people living today or towards the grand ideals or something, but towards people who lived in the past. If you actually go and look at what America was like in 1950, it becomes deeply offensive to suggest that we haven't made any progress, because it's a way of cheapening the suffering of people at the time. And so to me, what we need to do is the ongoing fight to live up to these ideals, to make sure that these forms of less visible, more informal discrimination against minority groups cease and are overcome. And the idea of building a society in which, what skin color we have and what group we hail from becomes less important than it is now. Not because we're ignoring injustices, but because we've built a more just and egalitarian society in which we can relate human to human rather than just stereotyping each other as members of this or that group.